everybody. Welcome to the Overcommitted podcast, where we talk about our commits, our commitments, and some stuff in between. I'm your host today, Brittany Ellick, joined by my fellow code enthusiasts, Bethany, Erica, and John. We're a crew of software engineers at GitHub. We first connected as an onboarding group on the same team in GitHub Actions and quickly discovered our shared passion for learning and building cool stuff. Even though we're scattered across different teams now, we still come together regularly to geek out about technology, share what we're learning, and explore our life as developers. So whether you're committing code or committing to new challenges, we're glad you're here. Let's dive in. Today's episode is about how AI has transformed your work as a software engineer. Obviously, this is an evolving thing and subject to change even by next week when this actually airs. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about what we're doing now with AI and what, our thoughts are for the future of it. So to open up the conversation, I thought we could talk about what your current thoughts are about the AI landscape, just generally. John, do you want to go first?
Yes, I can go. Wow, what a great question. What an interesting time to be alive. Today my mom was telling me how she used AI to solve a plumbing issue. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think I think when, my first use of ChatGPT, and I think maybe a lot of people felt this way, it was like initially it was sort of just like a better interface for information retrieval, sort of like a better Google. Like instead of returning, 15, 12 blue links that you had to go click through, it kind of synthesized information um, and gave you more specific answers to the questions you had. I think now, right, now there's tools like GitHub Copilot that, I can write tests for you. I think, yeah, I mean, there's so much to say here. I mean, I use it every day. I'm sort of an AI maximalist. I'm like just constantly trying to see how much can I use AI to sort of automate my job and improve my efficiency. There's certainly limitations to this model, as I'm sure we'll get to. I think, right, I think one thing that I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say is there's also this idea of like, where do humans really fit within AI tooling? And like, when you generate code with AI, the human still has to read it and validate it. These things hallucinate; they get things wrong, and it's interesting because it's like in 10 years, if you sort of like think out 10 years ahead, it's like, and if you're using these AI tools every day, like what skills are you losing? What perspectives are you losing? I mean, I think all of us, we're used to coding every day, keeping those tools sharp. So that's kind of just like a specific interesting thing I've been thinking about. Are we all just going to forget how to code? But I think right now I'm definitely an AI maximalist, and I'm just really interested in like the upper bound of these tools, what they're capable of.
Yeah, I think I'm in like a transition phase in my usage of AI where like I think I was so yeah, our organization is actually like providing us a dedicated week to like try out a bunch of things with AI, specifically Copilot, and really like upskill, which is important because like any tool you have to learn how to use it in order to get really any value from it. And I think the more that I do use it and the more I learn about it, the more I feel confident in its use cases and applying it correctly. But yeah, I think something like overarching that I feel is that the hard part will never go away, which is thinking through the problem. And even though when I'm using AI at its best, I feel like it turbocharges whatever I'm doing, like the thinking part will never go away. Like for me, it's still my brain doing the hard work and then like telling AI, giving it direction. Like, yeah, like I definitely don't see a world in which I'm going to offload that part, but it can be sort of like a second brain. Yeah. And like I said, kind of sometimes it feels like it's really, yeah, making my life a whole lot easier, making the things that I do a whole lot more efficient when I'm using it well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all those points. I have found it the most useful to almost help with sorting through large volumes of information. So I find it super helpful for search. So anything that I would have gone to Google or Stack Overflow for, oftentimes I'll now go to like Copilot on github.com and ask it that based on a repo or based on some documentation or a website or whatnot. So it can kind of be a more conversational approach to searching, which I really, really enjoy and feel like I learn things deeper when I can truly understand it. And it meets me at whatever level of understanding I'm at, whether I'm a beginner or more advanced. So I really think that's a huge pro to AI. I agree that I don't envision it ever fully taking over coding. I mean, after all, at some point, an engineer or a person does have to support the code that's being deployed. Coding's only a fraction of the effort. But I do think AI can really help out with a lot of those issues, whether it's like finding where bugs might be or understanding code if you're new to a language or a code base, like we talked about last week. And I think it's super helpful with that. And I think thinking of using AI tooling for coding it as like analogous to pair programming is kind of how I go about it, because I mean, you don't lose your coding experiences by pair programming with somebody, but you rather, you know what you have in mind and you're mentoring and coaching them to that end product. And so that's kind of how I like to envision any coding sessions with AI going is, okay, I know what I want and I will like try to coach it through that, which I think there is some level of skill and that goes into from my experience before AI.
I think what Erica said actually was like super interesting. You're like, the hard part is thinking and coming up with a solution. And it's like, right, like I think like large language models just like technically have a problem with like context and like sort of like thinking sort of like longer term thinking, like with longer time horizons where there's like multiple steps. But I am like interested in like, trying to use these tools and bringing in context and like trying to get it to kind of come up with like end-to-end solutions. I mean, just the other day I had it refactor some tests and it got it right first time. Like I was using, Claude Sonnet 3.7. And the test passed. I looked at them; they made sense to me. And so, like, yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, like sort of there's a gradient between like I'm using AI to kind of figure out an API call to I'm pair programming to I'm telling it to write tests to like some agentic, I think dream where like you give it a Jira ticket or a Copilot, or a GitHub issue or whatever, and it can bring in multiple sources of information, maybe ask clarifying questions and just like implement it end to end.
Yeah, I think like the way I think about it too is like I need to have a mental model of whatever I'm doing in order to be effective in that space, which is kind of something we talked about last week too, with the like learning a new repository or a new problem space. And like you have to be able to like hold that in your mind to know if like any of the output you're getting from the AI is even applicable. Like you said, like the tests made sense and they have to make sense compared to what you're expecting in your mind, right? But yeah, I think like we've probably all had this experience where like one of the most frustrating things as a software engineer is not when you're in the flow and coding, but when you have that one issue that takes you 5 hours that could have taken you 5 minutes. And like those are the things that I feel like AI is so good for. Where it immediately sees like you have this dumb typo, you have this thing that's not passing in your tests, and you're like, that was so obvious, but like for some reason my eyes didn't catch it. So yeah, those are huge productivity wins.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I started out as like not quite an enthusiast. Like I'm pretty slow on the adoption curve for AI. In the last month or two, I've started realizing like, wow, this is improving a lot faster than technologies normally do. And now trying to really rethink how to add this to my workflow. And I'm thinking about it a lot because your entire workflow really does change. If you're used to going to Stack Overflow or Google or something like that, like that process is different now when writing code. So it's a very fun time and also like a slightly uncomfortable time while we're trying to like relearn how to work. Love what you all have said. And I feel like we have like a good range from an AI maximalist down to, I haven't used it a ton and I feel like I'm starting to now. And it's been really interesting. So let's talk about tools that you are using for AI at work and the ones that we can talk about. given that we all work at a company that makes AI tools. I think we have to be a little bit general about some stuff, but we can talk about using Copilot and stuff like that. So let's start first with documentation and writing. What tools are you using for that specifically?
I will a lot of times use Claude for like documentation and writing. I recently got a Claude subscription because I was, as mentioned in a previous episode, was trying to draft a bunch of proposals for GopherCon and was just looking for help to make sure that I was drafting it in a way that matched what they were expecting based on the resources they provided. And I thought the projects space was really cool to be able to add any like documentation or frameworks or whatever you're looking to use this context and be able to chat within those parameters. And I think OpenAI has its own version of that as well. And so I find that really helpful for just like kind of brainstorming and getting ideas. For writing documentation in general, I'll usually write a loose rough draft of what I'm looking for if I already know what I want to say. And I often will check it against like Claude, or if it's more technical, against Copilot in github.com to like make sure it makes sense, it flows well, and I'm conveying my thoughts the way that other people can understand them. And I find it super helpful for just making sure that what I'm saying makes sense, because sometimes it's tough if you have a lot of knowledge on something and you're just brain dump. People are like, I don't understand any of this. So I really appreciate that.
Yesterday, for the first time, I used the I think it's /doc command in Copilot chat, which will like generate documentation code comments for like a certain set of methods, or like all of the methods in a file. You know, that is really nice for anyone who's reading your code, or even if you're looking at a method that you wrote and trying to make sure it makes sense, like inputs and outputs. So that's I think that's a nice feature that's built in now.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I actually haven't used that, so I will check that out. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I use so like, you know, I have like a Copilot Pro and Claude Pro account, and I use them a lot for like editing. I'll paste in something I wrote, like for a personal project, like a blog post. I'll paste in a blog post and say, could you edit this for clarity? I've used like Notebook LLM, which is Google's open source tool, which you could, I think we had similar functionality using Claude. But like I'll upload it, like I wanted to write a paper, or I wanted to write a blog post on a paper. And so I uploaded the paper, and I had Notebook LLM summarize the paper for me, and then, you know, I asked it to write me, you know, a little blog post, kind of rough draft. Yeah, so I think you know, I'm actually, I'm not sure if this is released yet, but I mean, the other thing I use a lot, sorry for making your editing job life harder, but I know like Copilot also generates PR comments, which sometimes when I generate those, that's nice. Or sorry, yeah, like PR descriptions.
Yeah.
And then yeah. Sorry, go on.
Merge commit messages.
Yes.
Those are so nice.
Totally. And it's kind of like, you know, it's funny, like I write pretty poor merge commit messages. And it is kind of nice, like having that automated. Are they always the best? No. Are they a little wordy? But, you know, you can also tune that. You know, you could tune that. And then yeah, like Gemini is pretty useful in like the G Suite. You know, I'll just reach for that. One thing I've really gotten into is I like generating like header images for my Google Docs. So you can generate like, you know, you can be like, you know, generate a picture of like databases and then flames, and you can have like a fun header image. So yeah.
Is that like a good database paper or a bad database paper if it's on
No.
fire?
No, that's like when I'm writing like an availability review postmortem.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, I go back and forth between Claude and ChatGPT right now. I heard a really funny joke the other day where folks were talking about how they're spending more right now on their AI subscriptions for different things than they are on their streaming service subscriptions, which might just be the state of where we're at I haven't committed to one just yet to subscribe to, but I'm getting there. I really want the projects functionality, which I think I have to subscribe to Claude or to Open it or to ChatGPT to be able to get. So still waiting to see which one wins between those two. I've also been like Googling what's on our public docs while we're talking about this to see like what has been released, because we do get to, do a lot of dog fooding and try stuff out before it's public. So I think we're good on PR descriptions. My brother just mentioned it the other day, so I think we're safe there. Nice. What about for code? Obviously, is there a different workflow for code? We're all obviously using a lot of Copilot, but is there anything that you want to talk about there in terms of, different things that you're using?
Well, so I listened. So this podcaster, Lex Friedman, shout out Lex Friedman, he interviews people and he had the Cursor team on. And, it's these 4 like MIT graduates. And they spent a lot of time talking about sort of like the UX of these coding tools, these AI coding tools. And, it's like, I don't think like the user experience is exactly like, I don't think it's like where I would want it to be. And I think one thing is like, that I think about a lot is like, like I use like NeoVim and Vim, and now I have like Vim bindings. And like one of the nice things about that is like if you use it a lot, you eventually get to a point where editing a document, like you're not using brain cycles for that. So instead you could think about like, the code you're trying to write. And I think like, some type of seamless integration with my text editor would be nice. I think like sometimes, auto completions can feel a little aggressive, So I think something that would like really almost like predict what I want to do and really just allow me to like, seamlessly edit things very quickly. And kind of, almost like predict where I'm, gonna miss something would be nice. And yeah, you don't want like autocompletes that are aggressive or incorrect. Sometimes I accidentally hit tab and then I have to like go and delete 4 lines of code, which is kind of frustrating. So I think obviously we're early days with these tools, and I think that eventually there'll be better UX that really kind of augments human behavior in a more seamless way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited because I think working on the GitHub monolith is a lot of like discovery of style, best practices, discovery of tooling. Like, there's a lot to grok before you get to a point where you're, writing one line of code. And again, like that to me has always been the harder part. And like we said, that's something that I think that AI is really good at, is like crunching large amounts of information. I haven't gotten to the point where I've like set up enough like customization and like context to really get a ton out of it. So I'm still in the kind of like playing and experimenting phase with like different prompts and all that. But I think there's a ton of potential there. And then I've also seen some really cool experiments this week around using MCP servers to pull like Sentry and Splunk and Datadog metrics and help troubleshoot different problem areas in the code, which is super cool. And something that also takes a lot of time is like digging through all of those errors to try to find the problem area. So again, I have not tested out a ton of that myself, but those are kind of the things that I'm excited about potentially incorporating into my workflow. I'll keep you posted on how it goes.
I personally use Vim, like NeoVim, a lot, so I do rely on completions a ton for helping out there. And if I need to ask a question or about code, then I'll go to github.com. I do use VS Code a lot, though, to triage Copilot API, which I work on. So I am really excited to actually learn more about the agent mode and how to actually prompt it in a useful way to get a good outcome. But I've heard a lot of really good stories about that. So very excited about that. And also definitely want to echo Erica that MCP, it's still early days, but lots of exciting things coming from that. And a lot of really interesting use cases for it to really make a cool AI experience that can leverage your tools and almost like read your mind and be like, okay, these are the tools I would use. Go do what I would typically do, but in less time. So very excited for that.
Yeah. And to your point, Erica, I think, kind of the next level, right, is like having an AI have context across a variety of like information silos. So not just your code, but your code running in production, the different telemetry. I think you know, that'll help with triaging. That'll help sort of connecting what you're seeing with your code running under load in production to the code you're writing now. That'll help discover bugs. I think that's something that definitely seems like an area of growth and like pretty exciting. You could ask like, hey, like I have this query, and the AI knows about your database, your the load it's under, different metrics about your database. It knows the telemetry. You could say like, is this query going to perform well under load? And it can answer questions like that. That'd be pretty neat.
Yeah, and it's something that I feel like that specifically we reach a lot for linters, which are a very imperfect tool because linters are basically like pattern string matching. But like if we can turbocharge that and say like, hey, these are like certain code patterns that we've noticed have caused like availability incidents in the past, like that's so much more powerful than saying like your code matching this one specific thing that like we have now thought of. Like any sort of like predictive error analysis, not necessarily to like prevent it, but to like flag it and say like, hey, have you thought about this? Like, batching might be a good idea here. Something like that. So yeah, I think that would be really cool.
There has to be startups doing this, but like some agent that's like listening to your telemetry, ingesting it, is aware of your code base, is aware of sort of the infrastructure your code runs on, and then can like propose solutions like, hey, you've had this exception happen 3,000 times in the last month. Here's how to fix it. I mean, that would be incredibly useful.
Yeah, I almost wonder about like what the output there would be. Like, would that be code or would it be like a rule set, right? Like, and how you would apply that. So I'm not sure. Something interesting to think about.
I feel like this is a topic we're going to have to continuously revisit as things change because it is changing so fast. And it's fun to kind of hear some of these ideas and predictions about the future. Is there anything like what is the thing right now that you're most excited about seeing develop further?
Well, I think the flip side of my excitement about MCP is a lot of the security vulnerabilities that have been brought up. So I guess this is like an excitement of the potential of those getting fixed, but also like a fair warning that I read something this morning that over 43% of MCP server implementations have unsafe shell calls. Yeah, and they're like a major potential vector for supply chain attacks. It's like beware, be cautious of these things. But I think like it's not impossible to harden them and make them better. So like I'm excited to see that, and I'm sure it'll get better.
And for me, I'm excited about sort of agents, right? I mean, that's kind of where everything is going right now, and what level of human involvement will be required. There's a lot of tasks that are trivial, that take time, that take brain space. It would be nice to just tell an AI, go change this config here. It would be nice, I think like one thing that I've been wanting to try is like automate testing, right? I mean, I think AI could do a good job testing. If you tell it framework, you could say, as I'm typing, generate tests, run the tests. Even if you could automate testing, like sort of like in a more sort of procedural way, like SSH into this box, run this command, and tell me what the output is. These are all kind of just like boring tasks that I would love to have an AI do for me.
I see this. This is the new AI TDD from Jonathan Tamset, a new paradigm around writing tests.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen there's like I have like a bunch of blog posts bookmarked where people are integrating like OpenAI APIs into their testing. So I think like a nice framework around that would be nice.
I think for me, I am really excited that a lot of new models that we're seeing are getting more and more efficient, which will just make things, one, more friendly for the environment, and two, more sustainable, because when LLMs first came out, they definitely were not sustainable, and capacity was very difficult to get and costly. So I'm super excited about that we're going in the direction where they've become so much more efficient and energy friendly. Additionally, I'm super excited that reasoning models seem to be the new norm now. So previously, there would be models that, like a lightweight model, such as like 3.5 Turbo or 4.0 Mini, and then like a heavier model like GPT-4. But a lot of times, or now they're pushing reasoning models where you could optionally provide reasoning parameters. So you can really use the same model, but tell it how hard to think on a problem, which I think is a really interesting way to think through leveraging these models and LLMs. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I like the think deeply. It's like, yeah, it's like how much do I sort of care about a problem is how much I'll ask the AI to think about it. It's a cool angle.
Real quickly, I wonder if it would be beneficial to define MCP and give a quick overview for anyone listening that might not have a good
Gosh, yes,
understanding of it.
please do, because I still I'm trying to like adjust this so many times. Like, okay, I kind of get it, but please, from the expert, tell me, what is MCP?
Am I the expert here?
You're like the closest to
Yeah.
AI, I feel like.
You work on Copilot. You're the expert. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my understanding of MCP means a Model Context Protocol. And it is basically an API to provide a LLM so that it knows what tools it can use for its like processing. So if it comes to a answer or a question that it's not sure about, it can see what's in its tool set, which MCP describes, and it can go out and then fetch what it needs to actually answer a question. So you'll see a lot of, like, GitHub just announced an MCP, which has like a lot of GitHub functions that you can provide. And Erica was mentioning a lot of really cool implementations with like Splunk, I think, and Sentry. And then even I saw one for Obsidian, which I'm really excited to tinker with and see what I can do with that. But it's still very much early days, so I think it's very much evolving still. But a good analogy to it that I've heard is like LSPs. So I think that's language server protocols. If it's otherwise, correct me. Where people can define like what language structure is, and then IDEs can pull that and be able to show the like nice colors and underline errors and things like that. So it's meant to kind of be like that, except for LLM tooling.
So just to, so is it kind of like you're giving it all of these extra things that it can pull context on if it needs it? Okay, so it's like extra APIs that it has available to it to get more context if it thinks that it needs to know more about something.
And it's kind of nice because previously, so with agents, for instance, if you have like multiple agents in the same conversation, there could be crosstalk between different things. So like take the Sentry and as like Splunk example, for instance, if you ask Splunk for something and it pulls logs and then sends that to Sentry, that could be not great for data crossover. So MCP, I believe, should be a little better about keeping things client side so that it's a lot of the context isn't going to these other tools and rather keeping separate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thanks, Bethany. That was helpful. I think like one question I do have is like, so like you're using some like base foundation model that has sort of a general amount of knowledge, was trained on some general corpus, but like I wonder how MCP works with like ingesting Splunk logs. Like I guess like maybe the underlying model has knowledge about like what a log is, but like how does it necessarily know like what a Splunk log is, or like how to reason through these? Because is there some like post training tasks you can do on top of MCP to make it like work better with this specific tool? I wonder how that works. I don't know if anyone has an answer to that. That's just a question I have.
That's probably the boundary of my knowledge in terms of how it's actually used in practice. But I do know with regular tool calls, which I assume it would end up being something similar to this, you provide a description for what a tool call is and does, and then kind of the parameters it needs so that it gives your LLM more of an understanding for how to use that tool. And so I think there's a level of skill in prompting that correctly and making sure that it knows when it should be using those tooling calls effectively.
Yeah. And plug for that book by Dorkesh Patel that I linked yesterday. I actually am forgetting the title of the book. Maybe we'll put the title in the show notes. Maybe not. If it's there, then you'll see it. But yeah, the Dorkesh Patel is pretty cool. If you haven't listened to him, he has a podcast and he's interviews people, and a lot of them are AI people. And so yeah, his book was a pretty good. Like I started reading it, and it was like a pretty good overview of like sort of like philosophical topics in LLMs, and then just also like more practical stuff, like how to recommend
That's
it.
cool. I definitely feel a little bit more pressure now from the industry in general to learn more about this and, see where the future of this goes. This was great. Thank you all. This feels like our normal sessions where we're just sharing things that we've learned about, which is fun. I'm sure we'll come back to AI in the future, like we have talked about AI a lot in the past. How about we start wrapping things up and talk about one app idea if you were not already committed, something that you would be exploring right now with AI if you were not already overcommitted.
So speaking of like knowledge bases, I use Slack a lot as a knowledge base. And I do have Slack AI enabled, which is nice. And when I search for something, it provides suggestions or like, a variety of results. But I have found it pretty limited. And I think something that I would love to build is a more complete search result page for Slack, being like like suggested keywords, like suggested alternate searches, being like ranking by relevance or like time. And then also I have this like idea of like a visualization where there's like some kind of like heat map by channel of like how often something is mentioned. Yeah. So that's what I would be building, is like a supercharged Slack search interface. My dream world.
And I love that idea. And one of my dreams is to kind of like sort of to piggyback off that is like, there's information silos and like, you work at a company, there's just so much time you're just searching for stuff. And so some type of like LLM interface that, integrates your internal docs, your code, issues, PRs, everything in Slack. I mean, that would be super useful. So, I don't know, that's a pretty ambitious app, but like I think that like with LLMs, training on sort of the total sum of internal documents that you'd be interested in would just be incredible.
To build on that, I think I want to experiment with some of the Obsidian LLM stuff. And I feel like if there was some connection, if we could just merge all the things together in the world, all of the knowledge, then that would be great, obviously. But if there was some sort of a connection between like the notes I've taken as well as the internal documentation, maybe that's just a sign that I need to write more internal documentation so that it could all be included in that. But yeah, I really would like to experiment more with the Obsidian stuff.
Okay, that would be like especially cool if there was some kind of like push functionality where like it would like suggest things in your notes. Like it was like searching things and being like, I found this potential inaccuracy, or like I found this related post that like might update whatever information you had. Yeah. Again, dream world.
I think you all should just quit your day jobs and build these things for me, because I want all of these. Amazing ideas. My idea, so last week I pitched my idea and John had a solution to it. So maybe it'll happen this week if I pitch this other idea. But every Christmas, my family does lists for like what they want and stuff. And without fail, so they only talk with each other on Snapchat. So without fail, we have a bunch of sub Snapchat groups with just everyone but one person say, okay, what are you getting? What are you getting? What are you getting? I would like to create an app that is basically a wedding registry, except for just Christmas or birthdays or whatever holidays. And then other people can see what other people are like committing to. And then the person who made the list doesn't see it. But that would be my dream.
No, I'm like commenting on everybody's ideas, but like I think one fun alternate to that is like an evil alternative, right? Where it's like it like sees what you get and like gets you the opposite, or like suggests like
like a white elephant one, version of it.
exactly.
Yeah, the gag gift version. That would be good. Yeah, I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. I'm terrible at picking out gifts, and I think about it way too much. So I would definitely use that.
Well, maybe I'll vibe code it one of these days.
It's like
it's simple enough where I'm like, I maybe could do it, but complicated enough in terms of you'd have to have users and like a server that I haven't set aside the time to do it yet.
Yeah, well, maybe next hackathon we can work on that. That would be fun. Awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in to Overcommitted. This has been a really fun conversation. I love talking about the state of things as it relates to AI, especially because it's changing so quickly, like weekly almost. I don't think I heard of MCP before like 2 weeks ago, and now it's like literally everywhere. So I'm glad that I finally have a definition. If you like what you hear, please do follow or subscribe or whatever it is you're supposed to do on whatever your podcast app of choice is. Also now on Blue Sky, which is our social media app of choice. I unilaterally made that decision because that's the one that I use the most and made everybody else make an account. So we're all there now. Most of all, I think the most important thing is just share with your friends. Until next week, we are overcommitted, and thank you for hanging out.